Now, I know what you're thinking on Mother's Day. Is this going to take long? Because the lines are long as well. So we're going to try to get right to it. I hope you read in your bulletin that article on the inside by Amy Young. There are many things you could say and should say on Mother's Day because we have mothers of all stripes and sizes and so forth in different situations in life. And I think you'll find something that should or could be said to moms or former moms. I don't guess you're ever a former, but moms coming up or those who are not moms. There's something to say about moms on this particular day. We're not going to look at a Norman Rockwell portrait this morning. And that's where everything is neat and tidy and picture perfect, where moms are the perfect mom. And if you were afraid that we were going to go to Proverbs 31 and look at Supermom in that chapter described, your fears, let them be allayed this morning. Because we're going to look at a mom who doesn't typically get the spotlight on her on Mother's Day, and that's Hagar, whose story is basically told in Genesis chapter 16 and then again in chapter 21. She is an individual who has an encounter with God in the wilderness. And she is an individual who gives a name to this God that she encounters. No one else in all of Scripture does this. God is usually the one who says, "This is who I am." When she encounters this angel of God in the wilderness, she says, "I have seen this God," or "this God has seen me." And she calls him El Roi, the God who sees me. And we want to talk about how God sees us, whatever our situation. She was not, as we say, the picture-perfect mom. She was in a conflict at home with her mistress, Sarai, who later became known as Sarah. And Sarah herself doesn't come off looking real shiny as an individual or as a mom in these two chapters. And neither does Father Abraham, for that matter. He has his flaws that are quite apparent. And so, relax. We're not going to talk about the perfect picture this morning. We're going to talk about reality as it's seen in the life of Hagar. And we begin in Genesis 16, starting with the first verse. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. If you go back to Genesis 12, Abraham and Sarah are in Egypt during a time of famine. And Abraham, in not one of his more shining moments, says that Sarai is his sister. He's doing this to protect himself because she's very beautiful. He's afraid some of those Egyptians will want to kill him so they can get to this woman. So he passes her off as his sister. And when that happens, the Lord brings all kinds of problems to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh has Abram come in and says, "What is this you've done to me? Why didn't you tell me this was your wife?" And he sends him off. He says, "I want you to leave, but I'm going to have you leave with a lot of gifts." And he gives him a number of monetary things. And among those probably is this Egyptian handmaid by the name of Hagar. So Sarai said to Abraham, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant." Now, it's been about 10 years since they left Egypt. Abraham is approximately 75 years old at this point. Or 85, I think it is. And she says, "Perhaps I can have children through her." Now, this was part of the custom at the time. She's thinking of building up her family by using her maid as a surrogate mother. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. Yeah, you can just picture the scene here. Here's this no one, this nobody, a maid out of Egypt who has no credentials to show, but she is showing. And she's beginning to rub it in on her mistress, Sarai, who can't show anything. Well, the wise man talked about this phenomenon. He said, there are three things that make the earth tremble. No, four it cannot endure. A slave who becomes a king. You can imagine the big head that person would have. An overbearing fool who prospers, or one of the other translations says, who's full of food. I suppose if you prosper, you're going to eat well. A bitter woman who finally gets a husband, and a servant girl who supplants her mistress. Well, that's the story that's going on here in Genesis 16 with Hagar supplanting her mistress, Sarai. Well, Sarai said to Abraham, this is all your fault. Now follow the logic. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. Now, do you think Sarah has any doubt as to who's wrong in this situation? Okay. Abram replied, look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. He mans up. Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. Where's she going to run? The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. Here she is. She's run away from a bad situation. She's out in the wilderness, and the word Shur means wall. She's come up against a wall in the wilderness as she's trying to probably approach Egypt, from where more than likely she originally came. This term, the angel, is used a few times in the Old Testament, and it usually refers to a particular representative of God. The term angel also means messenger. So here's a messenger from God. Some scholars think this might have been a pre-incarnation visit of Jesus as the messenger. And so the messenger finds Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness, and she's come up to this wall here, where the wilderness, it's not a literal wall, but it's a barrier between her and where she can go to get away from a bad situation. The angel said to her, Hagar, Sarai's servant, where have you come from and where are you going? Now it's interesting here that this messenger calls her by name. You'll notice as we go through these two chapters here that Abram and Sarai rarely, if ever, call her by her name. She's a nobody. But here, the God's representative, his messenger, says, where have you come from and where are you going? And she only responds to that first question. I don't think she knew where she was going, completely anyway. She says, I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she replied. Any place is better than where I was. Isn't that typically the way we face our situations and our problems? I don't like where I am. I'm getting out of here. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm not staying in this situation. Where have you come from? Where are you going? The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. God has something in mind for her. I want you to go back to your problem, go back to that situation that you're trying to run from and work it out. Grow up. Make amends with your mistress as best you can. That's going to take her part as well. But I want you to go back because I've got something in mind for you as well as for your mistress. And then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. We're going to bless you in some way, the Lord says. And it sounds very much like the promise that God made to Abraham back when. And the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. He's heard your situation. He's heard your problem. The Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. Muhammad, in the 6th century, I believe it was, said he traced his ancestry back to Ishmael and Ishmael's mother, Hagar, and then back to Abraham. Muslims, Jews, Christians all trace their beginnings back to Father Abraham, the father of the faithful. And notice the prophecy here about the descendants of Ishmael. He's going to be a wild donkey. He's going to be untamable. He's going to be the father of the nomads out in the wilderness. And his hand is going to be against everyone, and everyone's hand is going to be against him. It's going to be hard to get along. He's going to live in open hostility. Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me, El Roi. You are the God who sees me in my predicament, my situation." She also said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me? Do I see the one, El Roi, who sees me?" So that well was named Bir Lahai Roi, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Was it Abram that named him Ishmael, or was it the messenger who named him Ishmael? The answer is yes. I'm not sure if Abraham or Abram was tipped off, but he comes up with the same name that the messenger came up with. The story continues. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. And that's just what everybody who's 86 wants. A baby in the house, and we got to start looking for a school, you know. Oh boy. We move on to chapter 21. When Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned, Abraham prepared a huge feast to celebrate the occasion. This usually happened around age 3, when they would celebrate age 2 or 3, the weaning, and have a party over that. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar, making fun of her son Isaac. Why not? His name means laughter. But she doesn't take too kindly to this servant's boy making fun of my son Isaac. So she turned to Abraham and demanded, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son." Notice again, no name. The slave woman, the nobody. She's causing trouble, and her boy's no better. He is not going to share the inheritance with my son Isaac. I won't have it. Poor old Abraham. This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. And he might have done something here. He might have manned up, but God told Abraham, "Do not be upset over the boy and your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. I'll take care of it. You're covered, Abraham. But I will also make a nation of the descendants of Hagar's son, because he is your son too." God cares for nobodies as well as for promised children. So Abraham got up early the next morning, prepared food and a container of water, and strapped them on Hagar's shoulders. Now this seems like pretty skimpy provisions to me, but that's the way the story's told. He sent her away with their son, and she wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone, she put the boy in the shade of a bush Now, this sounds like he's a little guy, but he's probably at least 14, maybe 17 years old. But he's probably famished and is about to die. So she puts him under this bush. She went and sat down by herself about 100 yards away. "I don't want to watch the boy die," she said as she burst into tears. Wonder if anyone's going to hear those tears. But God heard the boy crying. And I think God also heard Mama crying. And the angel of God, there it is again, the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven, "Hagar, what's wrong? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there." That's what his name means. God hears. Ishmael. "Go to him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation from his descendants." Again, the promise. And then God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well full of water. She quickly filled her water container and gave the boy a drink. Why hadn't she noticed this before? Have you ever been so distressed, so blinded by tears that you couldn't see what was in front of you? Ask Mary about it. She's in the garden, and she's seen this empty tomb. They've taken my Lord away. And she sees this man, and she thinks he's the gardener. Well, actually, he is the gardener. He's the gardener of the new Garden of Eden, which is kind of the irony of that little passage there. And she says, "Can you tell me where they've taken my Lord? All I can see is this empty tomb, and I know he's gone, but can you tell me where he is?" And he says, "Mary." And her eyes are open. And she's looking at the very God who sees her. And now, because he's seen her and called her by name, she sees him. And the distress is relieved. Well, she quickly filled the water container, gave the boy a drink, and God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness, and he became a skillful archer, which would come in handy if you're out roaming around in the wilderness. And he settled in the wilderness of Paran. His mother arranged for him to marry a woman from the land of Egypt. Go get a homeboy, that kind of thing. Well, that's kind of the end of Hagar's story here in the book of Genesis. But there's one other kind of footnote that was a little bit interesting and intriguing to me. When you go over to Genesis chapter 25, after sort of a footnote here, Abraham's sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried their father, Abraham, in the cave of Machpelah. I hadn't thought about that, but you'd think that Isaac might be there for the burial of his father, but Ishmael is also right there, because that's his father as well. Near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite. This was the field Abraham had purchased from the Hittites and where he had buried his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who settled near Beer Lahai Roi. Does that ring a bell? That's that well where Ishmael's mother found refreshment for herself and for her son. It sounds like some reconciliation might have been going on here. We're not told the details. We'll have to ask Isaac and Ishmael when we see them. Did you come back together? We know that some of their descendants passed on the dispute that Mama Sarah and Mama Hagar had with each other, and Israel and the descendants of Ishmael have long had their disputes. Well, let's get to a few quick points here. El Roi is the God who sees. And this God who sees finds. Did you notice in our text from chapter 16, it was the angel, it was the representative of God who found Hagar. She wasn't looking for anybody, but she was found. We sometimes turn that around, and we like to talk about how we found God. Really? No, we were found by God. Galatians chapter 4. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not God's. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, now that you have found God, or rather you've come to be found by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elementary principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? God is the God who sees us, and when he sees us, he is looking to find us and bring us to him. It is not the sheep who are out looking for the shepherd. Now, where did he go? You can't find a good shepherd. No, it was the dumb sheep that was out straying, and the shepherd left the 99 and went and found the lost sheep. You may think you found God, but God may have been arranging behind the scenes circumstances, sending messengers here, providing provisions over here, until, lo and behold, you found the one who found you. Secondly, the God who sees, hears. That's what the name Ishmael means. It means God hears. And God still hears. Everyone who calls upon his name, God hears us when we call upon his name. And the question is, am I calling on his name? The God who sees is the God who understands. He knows what we're going through. He knew what the situation was with Hagar and her problems back at home with this overbearing mistress that she served. Psalm 33, the Lord looks down from heaven and sees the whole human race. From his throne, he observes all who live on the earth. You thought the eagle had good eyesight? It can spot a rabbit 2 miles away. God can see us and hear us from his perch, which is much farther away. He made their hearts so he understands everything they do. He understood your situation, Hagar. He understands our situation. I don't like where I am. I don't like this problem. I don't like this situation. I'm out of here. No, go back. He hears, he understands, and he will help you deal with it. And then fourthly, God provides. For Hagar, it was water or a well that was there. And I hope you read that little bit there at the bottom of your outline about how good things happened at wells. A lot of marriage proposals. We call it the wishing well if you like. But Jesus, like this story here, found a nobody by a well, a Samaritan woman. And he saw her like nobody else had ever seen her. Well, who is this Samaritan woman? Oh, she's the one who went through 5 marriages, and she's not even bothered to be married now. She's just shacking up with some guy. He saw her, and he saw what was in her heart. He understood, and he made provisions. To the captives in Babylon, the Lord said, I will set my eyes on them for good. They're in a bad situation. They're in Babylon. They've been there for years. I will bring them back to this land. I will build them up. The terminology that Sarah said, let's use my maid to build up this family. I will take these people, my people, who are in a bad situation, and I will build them up and not tear them down. I will plant them and not uproot them. God says he will provide. Whether we're in a Hagar-type situation or we're just babbling on in our own bad situation. The God who sees is the one who promises. He made a promise to Ishmael, I'll make of you a great nation. You'll have many descendants. And the Lord made a similar promise. When you pray, go into your room, shut the door, pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. He will hear you. He is the God who hears. He is the God who sees when you're in that secret place. And he makes promises to reward those who come to him humbly, seeking his favor. And then finally here, the God who sees is the one who directs. And I love this passage from Psalm 32. God says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. I will guide you with my eye. Mom, have you ever guided your children with your eye? Where you kind of look over in this direction and you look back to your child and you say, clean up that mess. I want you to go to your room. We've all been guided by Mom's eye, I think, at some point or another. I want you, little one, to settle with your sister. Do you understand me? Are we making eye contact? I'm trying to guide you with my eye to your sister who's a nuisance. Settle. I think of the story of Jesus and Simon Peter. Jesus had already told him before the rooster crows twice, you're going to deny me 3 times, but I've prayed for you that your faith won't fail. You're going to fail the test, but I pray that your faith won't fail, that you just give up and turn it in and say, forget it. After Peter denied him that 3rd time, Jesus, remember, turned and looked. And I think he guided him with his eye and was saying to him, you failed, but remember, I've prayed for you that your faith won't fail. It's okay. This has to be for now. The reassurance, the guidance, the direction from that eye contact that Jesus made with Peter. And I think he still does it. Hebrews says, fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix them. Make eye contact. Don't look to the left, don't look to the right. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Be like Moses, who saw him who was what? Invisible. Some things you have to see to believe. No, I didn't get it wrong. Some things you have to see to believe. And when you make eye contact with him and your eyes are fixed on him, he will guide you with his eyes. He will direct you. He will help you to know what to do now, what to do next. If you need to respond, will you do that while we stand and sing?